Really appreciate that. I probably need my clicker. It's good to be here today. It's a little bit of a surprise for some of you maybe. I wasn't down to preach, but I was staying up. We've just been up at the ministers' meetings up at Avondale. Had a wonderful time, about 600 there, and 600 plus a few others, so over 1,000 people in that church at Avondale, and worshipping was a wonderful time. We had lots of great lectures and information, very busy time. My problem was I went up a little bit early because my mum is up there, and there's nice warm surf as well. And the first day I went out surfing, I managed to break my toe coming in on some rocks. So hence I came back a little bit early. There was not much point when you've got a broken toe. Surfing is not particularly good. Today how am I preaching? Because when I rang up Kim, he mentioned that he'd been asked to go with his family down the Mornington Peninsula for the weekend, so we've done a swap a little bit later. Okay, I'm continuing with this issue of Jesus' advice on conflict resolution. The key text here is, moreover, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you alone, and if he hears you, you'll gain your brother. Gain, of course, we realise that relationships are the key for our happiness in life. And one of the most important things about improving relationships is conflict management. But I like that little story about the Sabbath School teacher who taught a wonderful lesson about heaven. She was so convincing. She said to the class at the end, "Who wants to go to heaven?" And all the kids put up their hands, and there was one of the boys over there, and he didn't. And so the teacher says, "Why don't you want to go to heaven?" He says, "Oh, well, I really do, but not with this crowd." It's part of the problem sometimes, isn't it? The crowd that's around us, whether it's in the church or our family or whatever. And I suppose that's where Jesus says the rubber meets the road. All men will know that you are my disciples. What? Your love for one another. And that love is not the fact that you go around giving everyone a big hug. It's by the quality of how you treat each other when the rubber hits the road, and that's when the conflict is, isn't it? There's difficulties and differences. So let's have a quick review of where we've been on this one. Love your neighbour. It's an agape, principled love. We realise that Jesus says we should expect it. We should realise that each person has a challenge, their brokenness. Remember the brokenness of people. Don't lose your cool. Don't fuel the fire. Sometimes overlook the offence. Be willing to admit your mistake. Pray for the person. It's hard to be mad at someone you're praying for. Show kindness. The Lord will reward thee. Then we had a look last time at the fact people often jump to Matthew 18, which we're going to look at today, but we realised that Jesus talked about those other two times, and probably more, but they're probably two ones that we just read out in our scripture reading, Matthew 5 talking about feeling angry at someone, and then it says, well, now if you go to the temple, or if you go to, and you realise you've got some sort of problem with someone, then go right then and sort it out. And we saw that taking early initiative to put things right, approaching the issue with an attitude, it's your problem, not theirs. And of course, Luke 6, where if you're trying to help someone, the speck or sawdust in their eye, sometimes you've got a big beam in yours, so you get rid of the big beam in your eye, and then you'll be able to help. And what Jesus is really saying there is, if you approach the conflict with an attitude that it's 80% my problem, then you'll sort it out. Marriage counselling, if someone comes along, a couple come along, and the husband says, got this problem we're trying to work through, but, if you can help us, because I think I'm about 80% of the problem. And the wife says, oh, no. We have got a problem, but I think I'm 80% of the problem. Then you think, wow, this issue was almost sorted out already, isn't it? And so Jesus is saying, this is an attitude when we approach Matthew 18. Let's have a look at Matthew 18 now. Let's have a look at the key aspects here that sometimes are misunderstood. Firstly, go privately. Well, that implies consideration and organisation. It's not to grab the front of his shirt and say, hey mate, come over here where these jerks can't hear us, I'm got something to tell you. No, going privately implies, you thought about, okay, now let's go consider it. As Proverbs 15 and verse 28 says, the heart of the godly thinks carefully before speaking. The mouth of the wicked overflows with evil words. Then I want to remind you about Matthew 18, where it starts with if, not when. If, not when. And I believe that Jesus is throwing in the thing here saying, okay, has your brother sinned against you? Has your sister sinned against you? Has that person? We need to think carefully, and this is where Luke 5, think about the beam in your own eye. Is that making you think that this person has offended you? I think too, something that is sometimes misunderstood is going privately, one-on-one, does not mean that you don't go and seek confidential counsel first. No, you think, oh, well, I can't go and speak to anyone else about it. No, that's true, that's gossip. But there's a difference between going to a gossip and going to someone who is a confidential counsellor that can give you advice. As Proverbs 20 and verse 18 says, plans succeed through good counsel. Don't go to war without wise advice. Don't try and deal with conflict without wise advice. Of course, going privately means not the heat of the moment. Now, I have to say, if my wife watches this later, this illustration is from a book. But yes, it is a bit close to home, because yes, we do have issues with me carrying out the trash as I should, or garbage. But your partner not taking out the garbage out tonight isn't really why you're mad. It's probably something deeper. Perhaps you're really upset because his actions indicate they don't respect your time and effort you made in keeping the house clean. Searching for the deeper reasons for conflict is an important step in improving a relationship, but is not easily done in the heat of the moment. If you have to, take a break, let yourself cool down. We operate much more rationally when we're calm and collected. When we're fired up, angry, we tend to say and do things we regret. We often run on hot emotions. When we are in conflict, we are irrational, reactive, and quick to respond. Later, when we cool down, we can be rational, calm, and level-headed again. Yeah. And I believe that's why Jesus says, go privately. Because rarely is it when we feel we've been offended, is it private. So it means, okay, I need to go and think about this. Next step in Matthew is, I think this is a very important thing. If he hears you, if she hears you. What does this imply? It's nothing to do with whether they've got ears, whether they've got stuff in their ears. It's about communication, isn't it? And how easy it is to communicate in such a way that they just aren't hearing you. They just switch off the moment you walk up to them. Your body language can totally turn someone off from listening to you, let alone the way you say. Of course, Jesus in Matthew 5 says, the beatitude of meekness, putting aside our self-justification long enough to express ourselves respectfully and factually to the one who has hurt you, and be opening yourself up to their perspective. Of course, good communication, particularly in conflict, is the I message versus the you message. Lady has loaned her jacket out to a sister, a younger sister. Comes back dirty and a bit ripped. You ruined my jacket. When are you going to grow up? Okay, well that's what a you message is about, isn't it? An I message would say, I am upset that my coat was damaged because I can't afford to replace it. I really appreciate it when the things I loan you are taken care of. It's a big difference. Big difference between the I and the you. An I message can help you communicate your concerns, feelings, and needs without blaming others or sounding threatening. It helps you get your point across without causing the other listener to shut down. An I message says, this is how it looks from my side of it. Yeah, the old you thing, accusation, judgment, people don't listen, they shut down. So Jesus is saying, if he hears you, if she hears you, to do that, you've got to share in such a way that the person is capable of genuinely hearing. And part of that actually is you listening as well. It's interesting, Jesus mentions listening 3 times in this passage. And communication is just as much about listening as it is about talking. I was a energetic, idealistic, keen young pastor, an evangelist, and I went to this quite a reasonable sized church in New Zealand on my way to establishing myself as a major public evangelist, I hoped. And of course, to run good public evangelistic programs, you've got to help the church, be ready to have new people in the church. And one day when I saw one of the women in the church not dressing appropriately in the front of the church, I went and helped to realise that she wasn't dressing appropriately in the front of the church. Well, Barry Chapman, who was one of the elders, he was a Christian counsellor. He came to me well, let's just say 40 years later, when I met Barry Chapman, he reminded me about the time when I first came and reminded me that that lady had reminded him just recently, 40 years later, about that young pastor's action. Yeah. And that was probably the first time I seriously was on the receiving end or even thought about I and you messages, because Barry, being a counsellor, came and talked to me. I feel angry about the way because I would prefer that. I must admit, as I look back, I realised I appreciated that he was willing to work with a young, idealistic, young, energetic pastor that might not have been so wise. And it wasn't the only time. We had a few confrontations at different times. Again, when his son was in a baptismal class, and his son was about 13 or 14 and was quite keen, and when we talks, right, we're going to plan for a baptism, we're planning for a baptism in 3 weeks' time, who would like to be involved? And his son put up and others. I said, oh, fantastic, good, great, Went ahead energetically, and Barry knocked on my door a few days later, and I feel angry about the way, because I'm his parent and be expected to be consulted first, I would prefer that. Barry helped me to process conflict healthily. The result was, when I first came over that first incident, our relationship was pretty, but processing healthily, finally, Barry ended up one of my best friends at that church, and was the head elder in the year that we baptised 27. But I really am thankful, looking back, that he helped me process through and realise the importance of that clear but assertive communication, using that I and you, or the difference, using the I issue. Makes a big difference. It makes it possible for people to actually hear you and not just. Then we have the next step, which is sometimes again misunderstood. Getting one or two to come with you if there's an issue, and I think this really comes back again. If he doesn't hear, or if she doesn't hear, I like that translation. What it's meaning is the communication is still struggling to get through, and bringing another person in often helps that clarification. Not there to record every word that you say, but rather to help both sides understand what the other person is trying to say and make sure they hear it correctly. Then there's the bigger, take it to the church, and that again, is that the heavy coming in? No, I think it's because the broader church is less likely to be biased. Then we finally have that one about treat as a pagan. I suppose this sometimes again is misunderstood. I think the first thing that Christ is saying here is that there is sometimes we can do nothing to resolve the issue. Sometimes you can follow this process through, and like with Barry and myself, it works through well. There was a few times when Barry came to me, I have to say, where he was wrong in trying to, but because the way he said it, we were able to say, no, mate, this is just simply a misunderstanding. It's not my fault this time. But sometimes we can't resolve an issue, but we need to leave them to God. Don't try to get even or keep sorting them out or go around warning others about their problems. We leave it to God. Romans 12 is a text that is very important, I believe, in the overall context of having healthy relationships. Because if you go around trying to sort out and fix up and with resentment, no. I'm interested if you have a look in this passage, and I'd like you to turn to Matthew 18, because straight after this, treat them as a pagan, verse 18 and 19 says, I tell you the truth, whatever you forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven, whatever you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven. I tell you this, if 2 or 3 of you agree here on earth about anything, my Father in heaven will do it. For whenever 2 or 3 are gathered together as followers, I am in their midst. What's it talking about here? It's about prayer, isn't it? Any matter that you pray for, it will be done. And I just wonder whether Christ is just reminding us here, treat as a pagan, and then starts talking about prayer. So the very least we can do and should do is pray. Pray. And if we put them on our prayer list, because really when you think about it, a pagan is a non-Christian, and what do we as Christians do to pagans? Don't go around going, you're a pagan. No, we go, you're a pagan. Well, we don't even say you're a pagan, do we? We don't do that. We go, oh, okay, so they're a non-Christian. I ought to be on my best behaviour for a non-Christian. I want to win and help non-Christians come to Christ. So, Matthew 18, Jesus' advice on conflict resolution is shared there. Remember, when you approach it, you are there to gain. Gain in relationship. Going privately. Stop gossip, give time, more reflection, use iMessages. They struggle to truly hear what you're saying, get help. The bigger issues have broader group reflection. Sometimes it doesn't resolve, so leave them and the issue with God and keep praying for them. To treat as a pagan is try to win them to Christ. You know, that text there in Matthew 18 and 19 says, 2 of you agree about anything, it will be done. I wonder if there's a part of Christ saying, who are the 2 of you? Why? Why not your brother and you, the one you've got an issue with? If you can agree, isn't that the whole goal of what Christ is talking about? Ask anything? Why shouldn't be the thing you're asking for is to request to sort it out and have a good relationship? And then ultimately God's wish in all of this is that you will then become 2 or 3 who are gathered in his name with all power in the church. That's what our church is about, isn't it? That's what it should be about. And sometimes miracles do happen. Oops. It was right before Christmas 1982 that Tom Page got behind the wheel of a car with his brain saturated in alcohol, 3 times over the legal limit. Utterly drunk, he careered into the vehicle of Ted Morris, who died on Christmas Eve. Ted's parents, Frank and Elizabeth Morris, were obviously devastated, but their grief smouldered in animosity when Tom, after killing their son, was only given a 5-year probation instead of prison. That's pretty light penalty for destroying a happy family. The Morrisons weren't inclined to invite him home to lunch. More, they wanted to see him die. But they became obsessed in shadowing Tom because he was on probation, and they hoped that they could somehow see something in his behaviour that would put him in the prison. Part of his probation, Tom had to spend 2 nights a month behind bars. So have a guess what Mrs. Morrison did. She used to drive along to the jail to make sure he was there. And he didn't miss his appointment. Ironically, Morris's change of heart was made possibly by the very probation that drove them to hate-stalk Tom in the first place. Part of his thing was to recount required him to go and talk to high schoolers and be part of Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. When Mrs. Morris heard that he was going to take his first talk, she went along prepared to boo him. But contrary to her expectations, Tom didn't shrink responsibility for killing her son. He said, "I'm a murderer." And he said, "I'm really only got a slapped wrist instead of the punishment I really deserve." Mrs. Morris said, Tom looked like a whipped little puppy. And afterwards, she went up to reach out to him after the talk, and she smelled alcohol on his breath. Boom! That was what she needed. Probation violated, back to jail, and the door was slammed. That's just what they wanted. But the Morrises felt bad for Tom. They began visiting him in jail. He was nervous. He knew that they hated him. But before long, they secured the court's permission to take him to their church and other non-jail activities. Mr. Morris was a preacher in the lay preacher in the Baptist church, and it was after another year or 2, Tom asked to be baptised, and it was Mr. Morris that did it. Finally, they secured the court's permission for him to finish his probation outside of jail. He kicked his habit, turned his life around, and became an active witness in their church. Meanwhile, the Morrises realised that helping him was also helping themselves, since actively hating someone every day isn't exactly the best way to mourn a miracle. A miracle. As Frank Morris, the lay preacher, said, it was easier to forgive Tom than to build a relationship with him afterwards. I knew God required me to forgive Tom at some point, he said, but I could have dropped it after that and probably would have felt more comfortable. But I felt that Christ's forgiveness requires me to go a second mile and see what I can do for him. Miracles happen. And maybe that's the miracle that Christ is talking about here in Matthew 18. That as we have an issue with a brother and sister, someone who close, husband and wife, someone in our close family, someone in our close church family, that by processing and working it through healthily, the final result, the big gain that Christ is hoping for, is that we will become powerful prayer partners working together, just like the Morrisons were with Tom. May God bless you in your challenging relationships, that they may work through to make your life and everyone's life better. May God bless you.
Please stand for our closing hymn, This Love That Makes Us Happy. This love that makes us happy, this love that smooths the way, it helps us mind, it makes us kind to others every day. God is love, we're little children. God is love, we would be like him. This is love that makes us happy, this love that smooths the way. It helps us mind, it makes us kind to others every day. This world is full of sorrow, of sickness, death and sin. With loving heart we'll do our part and try some souls to win. God is love, we're little children. God is love, we will be like him. This love that makes us happy, this love that smooths the way. It helps us mind, it makes us kind to others every day. And when this life is over, and we are called above, our song shall be eternally of Jesus and his love. God is love, we're little children. God is love, we will be like him. This love that makes us happy, this love that smooths the way. It helps us mind, it makes us kind to others every day.
Dear Lord, we thank you so much for the challenge of relationships. Really, in essence, it's what life is fully about. And we thank you for the relationships, for the community, for the family we can have in our church, and for our broader relationships with family and friends and colleagues. May each one of us be better friends, have better relationships because we know Christ and because we apply the truths of your word for Christ's sake. Amen.